All right, this is video 3 for the claw training. So we just finished the why I share the gospel, and what you do with that same sheet of paper, your people, is you ask them to turn it over. So this is vertical or portrait, and then we're going to turn it to landscape. And so what we're going to do is you're going to have them put um, how right here in the corner, put a little box around it, how to share the gospel. Right there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to basically just break this piece of paper into 4 quadrants. All right. And you're going to have this, they're doing exactly what you're doing at this point. Okay. Now, at this point, you're going to tell them to put their pins down, right? And they're going to watch you do the first box. And we're going to slowly fill in these boxes, and we're just going to build the 3 circles. So this is where we start. Hey, thanks for letting me pray for you, or something to that effect. And you go, do you mind if I share with you a story that's changed my life? And I use 3 circles to do it, and it just helps me remember. The first circle represents the world we live in. And would you agree that we live in a broken and messed up world? They say yes, almost all the time. However, what I want to tell you is originally God did not create the world broken. He actually created it good. And I put a heart here because it represents that we had a perfect relationship with God and with each other. Everything was good. Our bodies, our minds, our hearts, the environment, everything was in perfect harmony. There was no brokenness. However, that world is long gone, and we got from here over to here because every single person chose to do this one word. And that word is called sin. And that's whenever we choose to go our own way, whether in action or in thought. And what happens is that sin lands us in brokenness. Okay. So what you're going to have them do is they're going to have their sheet of paper, and they're going to do exactly what you just did. Brokenness, God's perfect design, sin lands us in this brokenness world. And you're going to have them go back and forth with their buddy. And you're going to give them about, I don't know, about a minute. Maybe, I don't know if that, maybe about a minute to do that. All right. So you wait, you come back. So there's about a minute. I give them about a minute to do that. You don't have to write that. That's just for my own, about a minute there. All right. So you come back and we're like, all right, we're going to pick up right where we left off. And they have their pins down. So they're watching you. So they go back and forth with everybody. And then you're like, all right, man, do you mind if I share with you a story that's changed my life? And I actually draw it out because it helps me to remember. And I use 3 circles to do it. Would you agree that we live in a broken and messed up world? And they're going to go, yeah, I think we do. I'm like, well, what I want to tell you is originally God did not make it broken. He actually made a world that was good. Some people call it perfect. I put a heart there. It just represents that we had a perfect, loving relationship with God and with each other. There was no fractured relationships. Our bodies were perfect. Our minds were perfect. And the environment was perfect. There's complete harmony in the world. But obviously, that world doesn't exist. And we got from this world over to this world because every single person chose to do this one word. And this word means a lot of things, but ultimately means whenever we go our own way and we depart from God's way, and that sin lands us in brokenness. In fact, we're born broken. And it's just a matter of time before, as we grow, this brokenness comes and finds us. And we begin to do all kinds of things, not always bad things, to get out of the brokenness, to cope with the brokenness. Some people, they think money's going to fix them. They think just the right relationship will fix them. Some people turn to education. Some people turn to harmful things like drugs and alcohol. And there's a million different things. But probably the most common thing I see people do to try to fix themselves, just be a good person, kind of like self-help or religion, or even going to church or temple. The problem with all these efforts, it's not that necessarily that all of them are bad. is they just don't work. They're eventually they give in and you just snap right back into this brokenness and you go back running and it's like just this constant going back and forth. The problem with this cycle is if you die in this vicious cycle of running after these things, two things are going to happen to you when you die. You're going to be separated from God and you're going to receive punishment for your sin. Stop there and let them do that. So what did we add this time? We went through the whole thing, but this time we added our responses to brokenness and how we try to fix it and get out of it. And then ultimately, if we die in this cycle, two things are going to happen to us. We're going to be separated from God and we see punishment for our sin. So now it gets a little longer. You might want to give them 2 to 3 minutes to do this. So they go back and forth and they do exactly what you did on their sheet of paper. All right. All right. So we're going to run a lot faster here. We come back. They put their pins down and you ask them to watch you. All right. So here we go again. Man, I would love to tell you a story that gives me hope. And I don't know if I've ever told it to you. And I draw it out because it helps me remember. Would you agree that we live in a broken and kind of messed up world? And they're probably going to go, yeah, it is. However, what I want to tell you, and I don't know if you know this, but originally God didn't create the world this way. And I think intuitively we sense he couldn't have created this way. But I use a heart to represent how God originally created the earth. It was good, perfect. We had a perfect relationship, a loving relationship with each other and with God, and everything was right. But that world's long gone, and we got from that world over to this world because every single one of us has chosen to do this one word. It's called sin, and it separates us from God. And it's whenever we go our own way. And what happens is as we grow up, we feel that brokenness. And these are just all things that are things we do to try to kind of fix or get out of the brokenness or whatever. And there's a million different things. It can be entertainment, it can be friends, it can be destructive things like alcohol or pornography, or there's just any number of things. The problem is they just don't work. They might work for a period of time, but they ultimately don't fix what broke us, which is our sin. It just snaps us back into brokenness, and we're on this vicious cycle, just going back and forth after other things. The problem is if we die in this vicious cycle of trying to fix things, two things are going to happen to us when we die. We're going to be separated from a loving relationship of God. And all that sin that I've committed, not one of them can be swept under the rug. They're all accounted for. And I pay the punishment for that sin. This is bad news. There is no hope in this. The hope comes and God saw us in this mess and loved us enough that he decided to come down in the form of his son, Jesus Christ. Jesus lived a perfect life that you and I could never live, which made him a perfect sacrifice for all my sin. He took the full judgment that I deserved. He actually dies. He physically dies. And 3 days later, God raises Jesus from the dead. When Jesus did this, several cool things became available to us. One, the possibility of our sin debt totally being paid. He provides a doorway out of that vicious cycle of brokenness and back into restored relationship with God. Now, this is a gift, and a gift has to be received. It means you have responsibility to respond to this. You can not do anything. However, the correct response is to believe it with your heart. And once you believe it with your heart, out of a sense of gratitude, not earning, you surrender your life to Jesus Christ, and he becomes the Lord and the King of your life. Bam. We're going to stop there. That was a lot. So what we added this time, the big piece was the transition from the bad news, so to speak, of the gospel to the good news, which is Jesus coming down, perfect life, dying on the cross, rising from the dead. Several things fired off when that happened. Sin was canceled out, doorway out of that cycle and back into a restored relationship. our responsibility to respond in an appropriate way, believe, surrender. By the way, you can put whatever words you want over here, remit, repent, but at any rate, you get the picture. Now this, you're going to have to give them an easy, 4 to 6 minutes, maybe. You're going to just have to judge it because it's really getting lengthy at this point. All right. So now do this with your buddy. Go back and forth. All right. So now we are in the last box, and this is where we wrap it all up. All right. I know this is nauseating, but this is how we learn things. It's through repetition. So I'm going to start again. We'll run a little bit quicker here. Broken world. We all know that. God didn't create it that way. He created a good place, love, harmony. We got from this place over to this broken world because of our own doing. It's a sin we've all done, and the cumulative effect of that sin breaks this world. And so as we get older, this brokenness comes finding us. So we begin to find all kinds of ways to lean on other things and get our mind off things. And there's a million things you can put here: entertainment, the Cowboys, Netflix, you get it, whatever. The problem is they just don't work, and they just put us on this vicious cycle, going running after different things, all the way to the point where we die in this cycle. Two things happen to us if we die in this vicious cycle. We're separated from God, and we receive punishment for sin. God didn't want this to happen and knew there was nothing we could do to fix it. Remember all those efforts? So thankfully, God provided a way out of that broken cycle. And it was by him sending his son, Jesus Christ, down into our broken world. He lives a perfect life, which basically positioned him to be the perfect sacrifice for our sin. Something innocent had to take our sin because another sinful being couldn't do that. They'd have to take their front. So he dies and then he rises 3 days later. We call that Easter. When that happened, it authenticated who Jesus was and that he could conquer death, and he paid our sin debt. He opens a doorway out of that broken cycle and back into a restored relationship with God. Now, this is a massive gift, and it's not automatic. You have a responsibility to respond to it, and the proper response is to believe it. And when you believe this with your heart, that Jesus truly did this, God did this, it produces just a sense of gratitude, and you want to surrender your life to Jesus, and he becomes the Lord of your life. And when you do that, this is what we add: you become a new creation. It's really cool. And two things fire off. You begin to grow in your relationship with God and with others. But he just doesn't leave you to sit over there growing and marinating. He actually sends you back with a message to this broken world to tell your friends and family what Christ has done for you. So there's really only two kinds of people in the whole world, and this is really hard to swallow maybe, is that those are those who are new creation, who have believed and surrendered. And then there's people over here who are caught in that broken cycle. And maybe you've heard this, but never truly believed with their heart. Where do you see yourself in this picture? Which circle? And there we go. That's how we end. So we basically added believe and surrender, new creation, and you grow in your walk with, you grow in your relationship with God. Now that it's restored, you can grow. And but he doesn't sit there and grow, he sends you to go. But key thing is you ask the diagnostic question: where do you see yourself in this picture? Over here in this broken cycle, or in a restored relationship with God and you're growing? Where do you see yourself in this picture? That's how we end. All right. I hope this makes sense. This is the how of sharing the gospel.